Hello everyone, I'm Jan de Vries, your low-code host, and welcome to this low-code live build. Now in today's live build, we're going to take a look at how you can create your own good-looking front-end web applications by creating your own design systems in Mendix. So we'll be talking about architecture, scaling, importing and nesting layouts, and much more. Now, the UX guru and Mendix MVP who will help us do that is Jason Teunissen. Jason, welcome to the session.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Hey, it's great to have you here because you know so much about UX, and we want to teach the community what the best practices are. So let's get into it. Now let's see if I can share with everyone what we're going to be showing today. Now, I'll go briefly over what you'll be seeing and doing during the live build, what we'll be making specifically. Then Jason will show a little bit about what the actual end result of the application looks like after it's been built, so you know what we're working towards, and then we'll get into the designing itself. So Jason will share his expertise, and he will go beyond just the basics, so get ready for that. And of course, we'll round up with a little quick recap of what you've seen, what you've learned, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Now, during the live build itself, as always, the live build is being recorded. It's being recorded right now, and it will be available right away after the live session has finished. So you can share it with everyone by pointing them to mendix.com/live. Now, if you want to chat with us, or if you have any questions for us, make sure you put them in the chat, in the Twitch chat, and we'll cover as many questions as we can. And of course, you can join us in the live build if you want to. You can download the design files, the starter point of the project, but also the end result of the project. So you can explore those yourself. You can try it out and see what kind of best practice you can maybe copy over to your own best practices, or get some inspiration for new projects maybe. So go to this link, the bit.ly link, bit.ly/April live build 2021. Now over to Jason, who's going to tell us more about specifically what he's going to be building and showing you during this live build. And he's going to also give you a little bit of a preview of what the app, the end result will look like.
Yeah, thanks for that little intro, Jan. So first things first, I am Jason Teunissen. A little bit about me. I've been doing some UX designs in Mendix for the last, say, about 5 years. And I like to surf, and I like to do UX things. So about what we're going to be seeing today, we have a little session breakdown. So the first thing that I want to touch on is a bit about the UX architecture. So in software, you have architecture and UX. You also have a bit about architecture. So there's some pros and cons about different CSS methodologies. I want to touch on a little bit about utility classes, how they work, and how to scale these things in Mendix. Then onto the live build, creating the live build, and talk a little bit about the scalable layouts that we've created, cleaning up some of the styling, editing Atlas Core, which is always interesting, and using these utility classes, which can be quite powerful. So I think when we look at these things, the question always is, what are we actually trying to solve? So this is something that I've been asking myself for the last 5 years, and I finally have some sort of an answer. And it comes down to these framework goals. What do we want this framework to be doing that we're creating? So I think the first thing we want to solve is, can non-front-enders quickly and easily create new pages or new elements? I think it's important that non-front-enders can do these things. Secondly, I think it's important that they can, how does this conform to branding guidelines? And I think the third thing is, does it scale? How does this scale if you have multiple applications? So this is something that we've been trying to solve. So as an example, we have this little card here. It seems quite simple, but we can break it down into little sections. So we have the card, which is the rounded corners, the shadows. Maybe it has a hover state. There's a little checkbox on it. There's an image up top. There's some text in there, headers, text. There's also alignment going on, and different kinds of spacings or paddings. So we can look at this like, how do we want to create this? How do we want to design this? And we can look at that from two different points of view, which are different types of methodologies. So the first one I want to talk about is the inline styling. Maybe you know a bit about this, but the inline styling is that each element gets its specific styling. A very traditional, old school way of styling elements. You can do this quite easily in Mendix. You can say the width is 300 pixels. There are also other ways to do it in Mendix. But what you're actually saying is this element, this div, is getting certain CSS classes attached to it. So that's the inline styling way of doing it. Then there's the other side. The other side of the spectrum is the fixed DOM. I'm not quite sure how it's called, but for now we'll call it the fixed DOM. And this looks a little bit more like the building blocks in Mendix. And the way this works is often they get a certain class where here you get hero header and hero header 1. And from there, if you put the elements in a specific order, all the styling trickles down and everything works out correctly. So for this one, we might be calling this one card-image. And if everything's in there, then the spacing will work out, the alignment will work out, everything will work out. So these are the two different ways that you can style, or these two different methodologies. So now we're going to look at variance and scaling and maintenance. So as you can see, I have my project here. We have all these different kinds of cards. Some of them have checkboxes, some of them have radio buttons. These ones have chevrons. When they have chevrons, they might have a different background. When they're selected, they also have them without images. So there's hundreds of different variants we can make. So we need something that scales well and is flexible, but also something that's easy to maintain. So I've made a little graph here, variance and scaling. At the bottom is the question: can non-front-enders quickly and easily create new pages that conform to branding guidelines, and does it scale? So we'll put the inline in there. I'll put the fixed DOM on the side here, and we'll just make a little bit of a scale. So we have easy up top and hard at the bottom. So the first question is creating new variants. If we look at it at a scale, on inline, it's very, very easy to create new variants of elements. And the more you go to the fixed DOM, the harder it becomes. So that's pretty good. You'd think inline's good. If we look at the other one, scale and maintenance, how easy is it to update styling? This one actually has the opposite. So fixed DOM definitely wins on this side here. And the more you go to inline styling, the harder this maintenance becomes, the more harder it is to scale. So then now it's our job to figure out, where do we want to sit on the scale? So we have inline styling here on the left. On the right, we have fixed DOM. Then we have Mendix design properties, which aren't all the way into inline styling because you only have a couple of options with certain elements. You have the small, medium, large with padding or margin. Then we also have the Atlas building blocks, which are more towards a fixed DOM thing, which also makes it hard when you want to create new variants. Then we have Tailwind. Tailwind is getting a lot of traction at the moment, but this definitely sits towards that inline section. And then we have utility classes, which is sort of in the middle. And what I want to show here is there's no one proper way of doing it. It's sort of what works for you. If you're more on the inline side, it could be because you're doing a proof of concept, or you want to knock something out quickly, or maybe you work at an agency and you're working with a WordPress template and you want to quickly style it for a website. On this side, on the fixed DOM, maybe you come to a company that already has a certain design system and you just want to create it in Mendix, and then you'll be more towards that fixed DOM side. For me, usually we come to companies that don't have a design system but want to go towards a design system. So that's why this utility class works well for us. It's flexible, and we can also scale that up when needed and slowly move more towards the scale and maintenance side of things. So I hope you guys are interested about utility classes now. So let's take a look at this card. The card, from a utility perspective, we have certain things. We have the card, which has pretty much a shadow and a hover state, which is created by this card class. We have a checkbox, which is the context. It sits on top of the card. It's not actually in this box. So I'll show you guys a little bit of that later in the demo. We have an image. The image just says how high it can be. also how wide it is. I mean, it's 100% width. Your headers and your text, we can arrange that in this card. You can also arrange that somewhere else, typography, but you could also say if any headers are in a card, we want to have a certain color or something else, then we have a lot of alignment and spacing. So that's something that I'll also be showing you guys today. So yeah, guess we're going to be using some fun utility classes from now. Now, the second part of the theory is a little bit more about how does it scale? And when you look at Mendix, or I mean, any framework, scaling is always an issue once you have multiple applications and you start to grow and get a bit bigger. So I think the main scaling problems for me is I want to update Atlas without losing files, which currently so it's a little bit difficult to do, but if you know how to do it, it's not that hard. So that's what I'll be talking about. You want to distribute your frameworks independently, so you'll be able to move them around, update them, change them. That's something that happens when you have multiple applications. And I think the last one, which is something you guys might be a little bit more interested, is how to enable developers to play and learn without destroying things. I think that's really important for me, is to enable developers to learn in a safe environment. So we've created this framework that works that way. So if we look at the first scaling problem, I want to update Atlas without losing files. I'm not sure if you guys have ever opened up the theme folder, but it looks sort of like this. You have your app file, your app folder, and your core UI resources and main. We have these three up here at the top. We've done a little bit of rerouting. So I'm going to show you guys what that rerouting looks like. But you have main that always looks to custom variables and custom variables in your app folder. And from there, we have rerouted them into the 1, 2, and 3. This is a very specific order because CSS is cascading style sheets. It goes from top to bottom. So anything in the first project will always override anything in the second, and anything in the second will override things in the third. So the third is the framework that we use at First Consulting, just to give us a little bit of acceleration when building stuff. And I'll show you guys some of the little neat tricks we have in there. And then the company is something you'd pass around within the company. So if you have a client or a company, that's where all their variables go. And then your project specific is where you as a developer can play around, make something specific. And if it works well, you might be able to get it put in company and put in all the applications. So this is sort of the basic framework of how we solve a lot of these scaling problems. If we look at the second problem, is I want to distribute my frameworks independently. This also works in the same fashion, whereas if the things that you make in project specific get implemented and get used in other projects, you can move them into company, and then from company, you can copy paste that around. And that just all works very well. This will probably change in Mendix 9. There's some very interesting things going on there about modularization. But hopefully in a couple of months, then someone from the Atlas team can show us how that is going to work exactly. So the last problem, the scaling problem, is I want to enable developers to play and learn without destroying things. Very, very important. If we look at this project, the first one, number one, project specific, if we look in that folder, there's actually two files. At the moment, there's two files. There's the custom, which does a lot of the routing, and ps.json. So this is where I, as a developer, can do a lot of playing around with different solutions. And the reason we do this in this way has a couple of benefits. So the first one is that there are no syncing conflicts. So when you sync files, especially CSS files and Mendix, if two people work in the same file, you're going to get an error and only one of them can win. And then you might lose out on some information, which is a bit of a waste of time, which is no good. So having it this way, PS stands for project specific, by the way. You've solved the syncing conflicts. The second is governance. So let's say we have a PS Jan in there. He's writing some awesome code. I could look at it and say, oh, this is actually really good. We want to put this or merge it back into the company file. Or maybe I could say, maybe you're not using your variables correctly. Instead of using white, use $white. Which brings us to the third point, peer reviewable. Just like I said with me reviewing Jan's work, he can also review my work. You see like, okay, why is this built this way? He can ask me questions like, why is it done in a certain way? And that way we can learn from each other. This also minimizes risks. So let's say I write something that might break something in the company or the first folders. This way we can just take that text or that code out again, and it's back to normal. So there's no overriding of other code. It's only overruling it. That sort of makes sense. And then the last one is just the experimentational freedom. I think that's the most important. I think the only way to learn SOS and CSS is to break a lot of things. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be breaking a lot of things, and we're going to be using the inspector to figure out why they're breaking, how we can break them safely. And then with that, build a framework using the utility classes that works well. So that's the recap of the theory. So yeah, understanding the different methodologies, what works for you, where you want to head towards, a little bit about the utility classes theory, and also the folder structure and the scaling. So now we can start to build. And in the build, I'm going to look at some scalable layouts, which are very fun, how to clean up the styling, edit Atlas Core, and then eventually using these utility classes. So let's get started. It's going to move this one over here. So this is what we're actually going to be building. This is what Ryan has built last February. It is the crowdfunding platform. As you can see, it looks okay. It doesn't look super fancy, but I think we can bring this to the next level. So if we look at this one, your inspiration, it's the Restructure DOM. This is the final product. I just have lots of different pages here. This is what it looks like. It's got some little cards in there. We have some header images in here, and we've got some alignment going on. So this all looks pretty good. But first off, I'm going to show you guys some of the tools that I'm using. So of course we have our Mendix Studio Pro, which is this one, version 8.18. If you're building a design system, use one of the latest ones. Definitely anything from 8.14 above, because they have dynamic classes, which are very, very helpful if you're using your utility classes. So definitely say 8.13 above or 8.14 above. I'm sort of half speaking Dutch.
So Jason,
Yeah.
where do you do most of your designing? Is it in Mendix 8, or are you still doing a lot for Mendix 7, or where do
Yeah,
you?
most of our work is all done in 8. And like I said previously, 8.14 above is definitely the way to go, because it just gives you so much more flexibility and freedom with those dynamic classes. So yeah, that's what we're working in.
And have you already dipped your toes in Mendix 9? Because you were talking
Yes, I
about some
have.
changes coming in Mendix 9.
There are definitely some very interesting changes coming in Mendix 9. I've had some talks with some of the people working on it. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say, but I do know that if things are going in the way that they're going, modularity is going to be a lot more important. And with that, being able to create your own design system, share it, and also working with, I mean, I'm a consultant, creating these consultant frameworks that you can share around are definitely going to look promising. That's also something that I have here. I have these layouts that I'm about to show you. In the future, that could be something that you can just download from the App Store and use freely without having a bit of a workaround to get that running.
That's great. So it doesn't just become easier, but actually becomes recommended
Yeah,
to work in that way.
yeah, no, definitely. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Still a couple of months away, but it's gonna be fun.
Awesome.
Okay. So yeah, the tools that I wanted to talk to you guys about was the Mendix Studio Pro. So we have that. We have Calypso. So Calypso compiles your SOS and injects it into your Mendix browser. You can do your SOS compiling in a number of different ways, but yeah, I like Calypso because it just injects it into Mendix, makes my life a little bit easier. And we also have the IDE. So for this one, I use the Visual Studio Code. A lot of people use Visual Studio Code But you can use anything. You can use Atlas or Sublime, maybe even Notepad. The reason why I like this one is because I can just go ahead, I can drag this theme in here, and then I get all these paths, which I will be needing in a little bit. I've zoomed in a little bit. It might be a bit too big. Maybe something like this is a little bit easy for me to read and for you guys to read. So those are the tools that I will be using. Yeah. Now I'll go and show you guys a little bit about the layouts, because the layouts are very, very interesting, the ones that we use. So the layouts work in a very specific way. And the way that we've chosen to use these layouts is for a couple of reasons. So I'll go into that. The first one is top level widgets. So I'll just open it and show you guys what it looks like. This one is the feedback widget goes here. It's got a display none, so it won't be visible. But something that we've learned, another MVP told me was Pim van der Nol. He said, if you have things or objects or widgets, such as the feedback widget, that are used in multiple places, if you change their layouts, then sometimes they behave weird. So they might break. So the idea was to have all your widgets in a main level widget or a top level widgets layout. So from this one, we have the second one, which is your top nav. So this is your menu structure. And here on the right, you can see that's nested in a master layout. So anything that happens in the master layout trickles down to this one. And here, if we change anything, so this is our top nav. If we change anything in here, so let's say we put an avatar in here, it will change throughout the whole application. So this is quite handy because we have a mobile side nav here that opens up this one. And then we have our main. And in the main, that's where we go to the next level. So most of the time, the developers don't really touch these two. Most of the development work is done in your desktop pages. So I'll open up this one. This is the easiest one. It has a sticky top, there's a sticky bottom, and it has just your main content. So these are all built with flex layouts. So they stretch all the way from the top to the bottom. And if there's something in sticky or something in sticky bottom, then they just stick to the top or the bottom, which is handy if you're making a mobile kind of navigation, or maybe you're making a sub navigation that's only specific for certain pages. You can pop them in there. So another thing that's quite handy here is, I'll open this one, 3.9. They go all the way from the top to the bottom. So this is something that I've been struggling with in the scroll containers. So we made it ourselves. And here you can see it has a BG main. So BG main is a background main color. There's one of these utility classes. It just pretty much means it all gives it a white background. And because of the way these layouts are created, it goes all the way from the top to the bottom. So I'm going to show you guys that in a second. And then from there on, we can actually start building out this page. So the first thing we want to do is we want to locate our page, which is this one. I'm just going to show you guys in here. It's this one. So the first thing we do is whenever you get a handoff from developers, they might have built something in a proof of concept, is you want to clean out the whole page. You want to make sure that there's no styling in there. So you want to get rid of all these containers, with this one here. And you want to get rid of all the CSS on those. So you can add this one, the show CSS styles. You can click it and you can see there's some styling on here. Click it. Oh, we see there's a class on here. And there's also some design properties. So if we remove all of these, then it's completely clean. And we can do this for all these elements. Luckily, I've already done that for you guys. So this page is completely clean. So I will show you that one. It's this one. You can also see it has a different header. This one has a different layout in it. So from here, we're going to clean up the page and start building out our design framework. So the first thing we can notice is, even though that we've gotten rid of all the styling in Mendix, there's still some design, there's some styling coming through. I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but if you hover over it, it changes a little bit. If you select it, it goes a little bit darker. So what we want to do is figure out, where is this styling coming from? So I'm just going to open up my little inspector here. There are multiple ways to open this. And this one seems like it's freezing up a bit. Here we go. Elements. So you can press F12 or you can right click and you can inspect. This one is Control-Shift-I. There's multiple ways of opening this. And if you press this little button, select an element on the page, select this one, which is your list item, we can actually start seeing where's all this styling coming from. So we can see here it's coming from list view, and if you hover over here to the right, it says it's from source core widgets list view. So I'm going to locate that file, and that is in my VS Code. So I will just close all of this so you guys get a bit of an idea where it actually is, because I still have all of this open. So here it's in your styling, web, source, and then in core. And it's in here. So we go into main, because what we're going to do is we're going to remove the list views from Atlas, and that way there won't be any styling coming through anymore. And we can do this in a very specific way, and that's editing the main file. So if we go into main and we go down and we find where list view is, we can select it and press Control backslash, and then Control backslash will unescape it, but we want it to have it escaped. And then when you press Control S, it will save it. Then my Calypso will run again. See here, injected main.scss. And then we should start seeing the changes in our page. So go in here, and we can still see it doesn't look like anything has actually changed. But if we go and inspect this element, we can see the list view is gone here. So we actually have removed it from our design system, but there's some more styling coming through. So we're going to find that one. And this one is coming from mxui.scss. And as you can see, it's in source core legacy mxui.scss. So let's go in, let's find that one and turn that one off as well. So we go into the main again, and it's all the way up here, mxui core. I'm going to turn that one off. But mxui is quite an important file. If you turn that off, a lot of things will break. So we're going to find that file, we're going to copy it, put it in a place that's safe for us to use and safe for us to edit, and then update our styling, and then everything should work out well. So it's in core, which is here, it's in legacy, and it's here, mxui.scss. So it's currently not in our project because we've turned the routing off, but we can view it. So we go in here, we select it, copy it, Control C, and we want to put it in our company because that's where we want to maintain these changes. It's mostly where most of our design system will live. Unless you work for a consultancy agency that has their own framework, then you might have your own thing, but we want to put it in company. So we put it in company, and in company, we can turn it on. So we go into custom. I already have it here escaped, but I'll save it. And now it'll be turned on again. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, it's changed. This is the left-hand side. Now we want to go in there and edit that file. Now we can edit it safely without being scared that if Mendix ever updates, we'll lose our style. So we do Control F for finding, and we want to find list view. We've found it here. And it's actually, this is what we want to keep, the list view styling list 0 of this list style, because that's the little dots that they have. We don't want that. And the padding 0 is also actually pretty good. So we want to go in here and we want to edit this section out. And now we've edited out, saved it. It's safe here in company custom. And now we have edited Atlas safely and in a way that also scales. I also have this file, Atlas updates, here. It doesn't really do anything, but it's just for us that if Atlas ever updates, we can look in and see what we've taken out. So we've taken out the legacy, MXUI, we've taken out list views, taken out navigation trees and group boxes. So when you update that and your main.css gets rewritten, then we know what to turn off. So that's editing Atlas. Isn't that fun? John, have you ever tried editing Atlas?
I mean, No. See, I'm the type of person who finds the features in the product that I can just use out of the box mostly, and only on occasion when there's something that I want to do that's not available, I try and look how can I customize it? How can I go and edit some files that are not just available in the development environment? So I'm actually learning a lot today because you're basically teaching me, how to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And so far, of course, the Atlas UI has helped me build my simple apps. But if you really want to take it to the next level, then this is definitely very helpful.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go and start building out this page now that it's all cleaned up. I was going to do this real quickly. I think the first thing we wanted to do is put in a different layout. So we have this one, the 3.9. Just put it in filter, goes here. You'll see this in a bit where this has a different layout than the other one. And we want to start creating these containers that all work together. I'm just thinking, am I in the right one? Yes, I am. So to create a container, there's actually two very fun ways to do it. You can do wrap in container, which wraps this element in a container. And something not very many people know is you can dissolve a container. So if you want to get rid of elements, you can dissolve them that way. I want to put this in here. I want to put all of this in the container. Put these little buttons in here, and we want to give this a certain styling. So we want to have card in here, and we want to have it, give it a little bit of padding. And you're going to rerun this one. And while we're rerunning this, you're going to see that we're going to have a different layout because we've changed the layout. And we're going to have a more of a card looking design and a bit of padding. So that's what we get here. As you can see, these two cards are touching each other. I don't like that. And they're really wide. We want to do something with that. So another utility class that we have is something called the fluid container. And what fluid container does is it makes it all these cards fluid. So they go next to each other.
Hey,
We can
Jason,
specify.
can you
Yeah.
maybe open the property window, because right now the text is below your camera image.
Is it? That's not good. It's below my camera image. I think we just go like this.
Oh, that
Does that work?
almost.
Almost. Can I?
Yeah,
I'll just make it like this.
yeah. That's better.
Lower it down. Okay. Sorry for that. The fun of doing a live build. So this class is called fluid container, and what it does is it sets things horizontally next to each other. We can also specify how many we want next to each other. So for this, we want it to have 3 next to each other, and it's on the list view. Oh, put it over here. It's on this list view, and we also need to specify which item do we want this fluid thing to work on. So we specify here fluid dash item. I think this will really clean up the page quite nicely. Just gonna get it to rerun again. Something else I forgot to show you guys is the filter goes here. This is nice and white. And because we have these layouts, this scrolls, but the filter stays here. So it's quite nice when you want to have different scroll containers with a background that goes all the way from the top to the bottom. Now, secondly, we want to have this image in the top up there. We're just going to rearrange some of these icons. So I'm going to copy this one and delete it because that is the avatar. I'm just going to put it down here for a second and select this. And now I'm going to do it the other way. Container, you can do right click, add widget. And this one we're going to call image wrap. I'm going to put our images in here. And what the image wrap does is, because we're using these utility classes, I'll show you what we have here, components, and in card, we can see if image wrap is nested in a card, it behaves in a certain specific way. So we could make an image wrap behave differently if it's in a card, or maybe if it's in a specific section in layout, maybe if it's in a header. But this is why utility classes, I feel, are very powerful, because you can specify how they work on a top level, but also how they work when they're nested in certain elements. So I'm going to open the page. And now you can see that they have a certain height. There's still some padding around it, which is actually not that difficult to get rid of in the utility classes framework. They still have this width. So we open up the inspector again. We're gonna have to figure out where is this width coming from. And you can see width, element style, width is 300 pixels. And we can see, we can turn it off, see what happens. And we actually want to turn it off. And we can see that it's coming in through here. It's an inline style. And as we said in the theory, inline styles, there's nothing really wrong with it. It just doesn't work in our utility class framework and in that mindset. So we open up this one and we see here, it's coming through here, general, because we've gotten rid of all the CSS. So we can just turn this one into auto, fix that one, and we turn this one into auto as well. So that would have fixed the width. Now for the padding, because of the way our framework works, we can just remove this padding and we can put that somewhere else. We have this and we want to put some elements at the bottom of our card. I'm just going to open this real quick. We want these elements to have a little bit more nice spacing. So we've gotten rid of the padding and this will soon be full width. So display name, that's your username. Post text, that is what we want up here. Oh, don't want to edit this. We want to wrap in container. We want to put some style elements on here. We want to have the class padding. This will have its own padding. And then below, we want to have all of this working next to each other. Have some little bit more horizontal alignments going on. So we'll create another container. And this is where we're using the row classes. So row, all right, left, that will put anything in there all the way to the left. So we want the image in there and we want display name in there and these beautiful buttons. I'm actually gonna quickly turn these ones into links because I like the links better. We're going to run it and we're going to see that the padding has changed and that everything is aligned on one row all the way to the left, which isn't what we want exactly, but it's sort of going to show you guys how these alignment classes work. So now you can see they're all the way on one line, which is not exactly what we want, but it's the first step into getting what we want. We're also missing a padding out here. So I'm going to put on a little padding class. So that's this one, row left. We want some padding. And then we want these elements in here to be spaced downwards. So we have another alignment class, which is called left. I'm gonna put that in here, put the username in here, put these guys in here, put the likes and the hearts in here. And these will put everything to the left, which we also don't want for these ones. We want these two to have another column left, call dash left. And then this item and this item is going to be squished together, as you'll see in a little bit. Just getting it to rerun. Oh, these ones didn't work out correctly, but this one and this one, we need a little bit more spacing in between those two. Now we can do that in here, and we can put a class on here, padding L for left. And this one shouldn't be call, it should be row left. Just gonna get that one running. And that is basically how you can quite easily, without touching any softs, without recompiling Calypso, get these cards working and working with the utility classes quite well. Something else I want to touch on is these context icons, which are quite powerful. That's something that I showed you guys in the beginning with the cards, with how a radio button isn't just that icon, but it actually changes the card. So I'm just going to show you guys that real quick. This is the last little thing that we're going to do. But this is a list view. It has a listen to when you click on it. This changes. So I'm just going to open that one, context icon. Actually just going to get rid of these ones real quick. This listens to that. And then I'm going to wrap and container. Put here a card, a fluid item, because I want to use that fluid item again. Put in some padding. For this one, we want fluid dash container, fluid 1, because we just have one of them. And here we want to add another container. And this one will be called context dash icon. And what this does is it looks to the parent, and if the parent has certain context, it will change itself into the icon that it needs to be. So for this one, we want a context dash radio. And that means that this will change into a radio button. We also want to have a row slash left. And now when we run this, we're going from something that looks like this, hopefully something beautiful if I haven't made any spelling mistakes, these things. So when it's selected, it automatically gets the selected class, it gets a border around it. So that's already pretty cool. But actually we want to have a chevron. And I know that chevron backgrounds are blue and everything in there becomes white. So with the context icons, the utility classes, we can do that quite quickly. We put the icon at the back. We change this row left to a row split. Row split basically just makes them one left and one right if you only have two items in there. And this context radio, we're going to turn into a context chevron. Now rerun it. And then it's going to be beautiful. Get nice selected colors in there. And as you can see, when it's selected, it becomes blue and it has a nice chevron. The chevron alignment's a little bit off. So we can actually even change that with a row dash mid. There's a blog about all those alignment classes as well, if you're really interested into looking into that. And that was a little build for today. I'm just going to open up this, the presentation from current slide, and give you guys a little recap. So the recap was understanding the different methodologies about the different CSS frameworks, that there's no one right way to do it, but that you need to figure out what works well for you. An introduction into utility classes, how that works, how you can style things, and have a different mindset about how everything can fit together, how utility classes by themselves aren't very crazy, but once you start combining them, they can become very powerful. And I think the last thing is how to safely edit the Atlas core. I think that's a very interesting thing that not a lot of people know. And I think it's also a very powerful tool once you know how to do it safely. So with that, I'll go to our last slide, which is the Q&A, which I will let Jan handle, and we can figure out from here.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Jason, so much for demoing that and sharing that with everyone. These classes, so you've been using a lot of different classes. You have all those prepared, right? Those are your classes that you've written out, and those are your best practices. How did you develop those best practices? Did you just come up with that, or is that a culmination of years of experience, or are other people involved?
That's a good question. So I think it started like 4 years ago. I wanted to sort of reverse engineer best practices of Atlas. I believe there should be one way of styling CSS. So I did a lot of looking into this. There's a lot of different methodologies, and I sort of discovered, like, how does this all work? How does it all fit together? I know that Bootstrap works well. A lot of people like how Bootstrap works. So sort of, how can we do something that works well in all these different situations. I mean, end of the day, it's just a lot of trial and error. I think I think the biggest thing is removing padding from a lot of default classes has solved a lot of issues within the way that we work with Mendix. I think a lot of people, like, the first thing they ask me when they view this framework is like, your typography doesn't even have margins or paddings. And it's like, why is that? And often it's the case, it's because in Mendix you have very little control over how the HTML is built up. And sometimes you want to put a container around it so that you can style things left, right, and then on that container, you would want the padding that was originally on your header text. And just by removing all these things and having them loose and so that you can put them on the things you want, just gives you a lot of freedom. Another thing I've noticed is like the design properties that comes straight out of the box in Mendix. They have the large, medium, small, which is super good if you're trying to build something fast. But if you're working towards a scalable system, I feel that having just the class padding and just putting it on a card, then in the CSS, your designer will figure out, should that be 15 pixels? Should that be 30 pixels? Is it on a mobile? Then it should be a certain element. And it also gives developers the freedom to remember a lot less or a lot of fewer classes, which then makes them build stuff quicker. And then the simpler things they are, the less likely they are to break. So that's how the whole utility class framework that we're currently using came into existence.
So that's your definition of your framework is the utility class.
Yeah, I mean, the utility class framework is something that exists in CSS. There's a lot of different versions of it. And this is just our one, the first consulting utility class framework.
And do you so in this situation where you've developed this, this is not for a single application, right? The
No,
purpose is to apply it to a much bigger scale.
yeah. So like you saw in the different folder structures, this is like, we call it the accelerator, because with this, we can come in, we can build proof of concepts really, really quickly. It also means that everyone within First Consulting is building in a similar way, so that if someone is sick or goes on vacation, someone else can jump in and start building from that same framework. And we've also noticed that developers are starting to use it, build it. And if we create a couple of simple basic pages and we create a design and we say, okay, actually there needs to be another field in here, or we need to do something else, they can quite quickly and easily understand the framework, understand the logic behind it, and move things around. Like you saw with the chevron and the radio button. It's the same. Sometimes people are like, oh, that actually needs to be a checkbox. Now they know they just need to edit one class and everything just works out fine.
So do you have sort of like a quick reference guide for other people who are using this?
Yeah,
You said developers are now using it more and more.
yeah, we're working on one, but it's actually creating documentations. I don't know if you know this, John, but creating documentations is a lot of
It's
work.
fantastic. Yeah, I can imagine that for a system like this that I assume is constantly changing and evolving,
Yeah,
that would be an extra thing to maintain.
yeah,
Although it might make it more accessible for
yeah,
a broader public.
yeah.
Is, do you see this as something that you would only use right now within First Consulting in your own company, or do you think that this has potential to be adopted maybe in the wider community?
I think it would be amazing if it was adopted in the wider community. I know that there's a lot of different consultancy partners out there. They might also have really good ideas about how they build stuff. So that's sort of what I also wanted to do with this live build is open up that conversation. Like, show us the cool stuff that you're building, show us the sort of workarounds that you've figured out. And I know with the new modularization of Atlas coming out in 9.2, 9.3, it's definitely going to open up some doors. Like I said, with the layout, I definitely want to get that on the store so that people can just use that layout without using other stuff. And then maybe someone will say, actually, we want to use a utility class framework. They can just download the basics and use that, and sort of start mixing and matching and figuring out what works well. but I definitely think documentation would be a key part of getting that adoption rolling. That's something that we need to start picking up on our end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you want me to use it, then that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, you can already use it. You can download the files and you can figure it out and play around with it.
Definitely. Yeah, so if you want to download the files and take a look at these yourself, you can take a look at the chat. I hope that Ryan's going to post a link to the Bitly so you can download the files yourself and take a look at this design system. And of course, you can always hit up Jason on the community Slack and asking him about it, and we can build something cool.
Yeah.
This is a good question here from Robert Price. From Rob Price, this is great stuff. Can you write a learning path about it?
Yeah, I think I should.
There you go.
What's stopping me?
I don't know. What is stopping you, Jason?
Time is stopping me. Then again.
But this is I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Definitely have a conversation with the Mendix Academy team, because this is really, really great content. And of course, these are your best practices, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that before we make an official learning path of it, which means it sort of says, hey, this is the Mendix way of doing it.
Yeah.
I think it's very valuable that we say that these are the best practices for Jason or First Technology.
Yeah.
And that it works for them in their situation. And I think it's extra helpful if the other people in the community who have their own best practices around design systems or styling or designing in general add to that and say, hey, that's great. I see that you're doing it this way. We're doing it that way. And I think it becomes much richer that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope people will definitely see this and think, hey, I have something to add. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Now, something that I heard you mention also is Mendix 9. Now, we did this in Mendix 8, of course. I know that you're always trying out new things. What are some of the things you've tried out in Mendix 9, and how is Mendix 9 different in terms of styling compared to Mendix 8, for example?
That's a great question. I think, let's see, Mendix 9.1 is officially out, so I can talk about the things that are in that one.
Mendix 9 is out. Mendix 9.1 is
okay.
Out.
It's almost out. Well, I'm pretty sure I could talk about it. I could talk about it. So I think the biggest thing is as it looks now, there won't be a Calypso. So Mendix 9 will compile things in itself in Mendix, which is very interesting, and it opens up a lot of different gateways, doorways. And I think something that we've been talking about a lot is modularity. And I think the biggest thing it was already in the beta, but every module has its own CSS file, which means that if you use the variables well and you update things or upload them to the App Store and you re-download them, then you won't have to use inline styling anymore. So, it just opens up a whole new way of working. Everything will be way more modular, and scale better. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what other people will be building. And also
modularity and scalability are the two biggest things.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting things that I'm looking forward to. Other than that, like we did with Atlas, where we went in and we removed the list views, that will be something that's default in Mendix 9. There's one major file, the exclusion file. And if you put certain exclusions to true, that will be stored locally on your local file. And then once you update Atlas, you won't have to go in and re-edit it again. So I think that also shows that Atlas is becoming more of a mature framework and understanding that there are multiple ways of doing things. And I think that's exciting to sort of see that Mendix is growing in their UX maturity steps. So
yeah, and ultimately that recognizes the power of the developers themselves, right? We give the power to you to make that choice,
exactly
how you want to use it. So we have an option out of the box that you can use. And of course, if you want to do it your own way, you know, let's let's do that, right?
Yeah. And I mean,
Make it the way you want. Yeah.
that's the pillar of the marketplace is we have this awesome community, let them build stuff and enable them to build these awesome things. And I think this is the next step is inviting UX to that conversation and saying, you guys are building cool stuff. Let's start sharing that around.
Absolutely. And the development of this design system for you, how many people worked on this?
I don't
Is
know,
it you?
like
Is it just you mainly with
it's
a couple of
it's
people who are pitching in, or
yeah. I mean, it's a lot of it comes from and is rehashed from the design community. So we have the UX Slack. A lot of conversations are going on there, like how would you approach this? What do you think about this? If we do it this way, is that going to work out well or not? So there's a lot of back and forth. Um, I think I'm the only one really maintaining this thing. It's currently sort of run by me. There's other people within First Technology, First Consulting that are working with it, working on it. There's continuous feedback. Developers are giving feedback. So it's not like something that I've just developed in isolation. It's a culmination of all these people touching it, prodding it, using it. Um, yeah. So it's a bit of everyone's souls in there slowly.
yeah, yeah. And together you improve it constantly.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, we do have some other questions as well.
Okay, cool.
So, question here: when Mendix updates, how do you merge any new changes with the copied main.scss file?
Well, so when Atlas updates, so when there's an Atlas update, we just grab everything from that folder, put it apart, update Atlas, so you right click, update it, or you go to the store and you update it. And once everything's updated, we put our files back. They will overwrite everything. And then we have that one file that says Atlas updates. And then we go in there and we look, what are the things that we have turned off? Then we just go back in, turn them all off, and then we're back to pretty much where we were. So it's quite a easy thing to do once you know how to do it. I mean, to be honest, I think last year I've had 3 projects where I had to update Atlas. So doing that 3 times a year isn't too bad.
That's okay. Yeah.
Live with
As
that.
long as you don't have to do that every month, but
No,
still,
exactly.
you get into a routine. Yeah.
Yeah.
When is it okay to use exclamation mark important?
When you have about 5 years of UX experience, then it's okay. The short answer is it's never okay unless you know what you're doing. Um, so yeah, there's actually a very, very good guide, and it's called, what is it called? It's about how certain CSS elements overrule each other. And one of the top level ones is inline. So if you want to restyle a pop-up, for instance, the only way to overrule that is with exclamation mark important. And so it has to do with the specificity. And if you Google specificity, it's got these little fish. And then it was explain it a lot easier. So that, but like if you can avoid it, avoid it. I only use it for helper classes. I believe that if you put a helper class on something, it's because you want to get rid of something. So those are like your padding classes, maybe your padding -t. You want to put that on something and you just want it to work. Then those all have important. But other than that, you really shouldn't be using them. So that
Shouldn't be.
shouldn't be, unless you want to get rid of like inline styling. Maybe you want to restyle some widget and you can't get around it. I mean, it's a last resort kind of thing, unless you know what you're doing.
All right. Other question. How do you import glyph icons into your project?
It depends how you do it. Glyph icons are,
What options
I
do we
believe
have?
they're a font icon, right?
I don't know. I'm not a glyph icon expert.
If they are a font icon, there's a really good blog that I've written about how to do that. If they are not a glyph icon, then you'd have to do it through CSS. and just import that how you would import any other SVG. There's a whole bunch of guides. I mean, I could Google it. I mean, actually, I don't know who wrote that, but give me a message in Slack and I'll figure it out for you. I'll send you the blog.
Okay, so you would just Google that as well, and basically,
Yeah, Google. I think it's a font icon. If it's a font icon, I know there's a blog out there. It sort of depends also, do you want to do it in 7 or 8? But I think if you do it through your font icon, you should be good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell us how you can edit the Atlas core for native mobile?
No, I can't tell you that.
Cannot.
That's one thing I have absolutely no idea. I actually haven't touched
You
Mendix
haven't
Mobile
touched
yet.
native mobile.
No.
Okay.
It's not sus. It's not web. It's scary.
Okay.
All my
Okay.
knowledge is web.
So if I were to say, Jason, challenge, get yourself
Do it.
inoculated into native mobile, then in about 6 months we can have another live build in
Yeah,
there.
we could. Actually, I know someone that's very well versed in Mendix Native. Or
Good.
yeah, was it React Native, Mendix
React
Mobile?
Native. Yeah. React Native, native mobile. Yeah.
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 So I'll get her to write a little blog.
Good, because I think we need to make sure that people are not scared of native mobile, because this is a really important part also for designers like yourself
Yeah.
to get updated on. So, well, for now, Jason, thank you so much for your time. It's
Yeah.
been incredible. I have learned a lot, and I hope the people who are watching us today have learned a lot as well. Now, if you asked a question or if you have any more questions for Jason about UX, make sure that you join us on Slack. The links are in the chat, so you can join us there. And please join us next time for Mendix Live, for a live build, a Maker Monday, an Art of the Possible, or a release deep dive. So next week we have a Maker Monday and a release deep dive on Mendix 9.1. So make sure you don't miss out. Go to mendix.com/live and join us there. I'm Jan de Vries, your low-code host, and I'll see you next time.